Well, I mean, let me just kind of lay out what I expect as a couple of big mega political trends, some related to climate change and some related to other things. One is, this is what I talked about with this kind of like subdivision into economically viable smaller units. I mean, the territorial nation state arose 500 years ago because it was the size of unit that both made military and economic sense. As we're moving toward a point where smaller political units can be economically viable through additive manufacturing, through artificial intelligence, through remote work and stuff like that, I think we're going to see something of a division into smaller political units. In part because of climate change, because of COVID, because of population growth, I think we're going to see more and more world and what they're going to be facing in coming years. I mean, one idea that I've kind of played with on that is that if you buy the notion that nations that can move uh, uh, more of their industrial economic input closer to home, like the United States, Japan, Northern Europe, and so forth, I think that there's going to be a lot less demand for inexpensive labor from the parts of the world that have lots of people and not a whole lot of economic activity. So from parts of Asia, parts of Latin America, parts of Africa, or whatever, I think that it's going to be harder and harder for, say, Africans to go to Europe, to North America to get jobs. That's just going to put more and more pressure back on those nations as well. So I'm really, really worried that there's going to be just massive numbers of state collapses around the world. And that's going to create kind of an ethical dilemma for the United States, because we're going to see unfolding humanitarian disasters, and we're going to see them in real time. They're going to be on people's cell phones. This isn't going to be something abstract like a famine in Somalia in the 1970s. It's going to be something we see real time. So we're going to have to like ethically grapple with this idea of what do we do when there are these cascading state failures and humanitarian disasters around the world. So I think that's going to be one of the big political trends. So I guess what I'm saying is I predict more of a de-linkage. We've seen like the last 50 years has been increasing linkage, connectivity, globalization. I think we're going to be moving toward a point where we have more virtual connectivity. All of us will probably have close friends that are spread all around the world that we interact with in this way. But I think that we're going to see more of a physical separation. And one way that I've kind of phrased that in a talk I've been giving on kind of my prediction for the future after COVID is to say, think of what we all learned about social distancing over the last year, how we developed an instinctively different way of dealing with other people, this physical separation, stuff like that. I think we're going to see kind of social distancing between nations of the future. They're going to still, they're going to deal a whole lot with each other virtually, but I think there's going to be less physical connectivity, less movement of people and goods between nations than there were in the past. So, in some ways, we're going to see this kind of global fragmentation. We're going to see pockets of just of chaos and instability. But at the same time, on top of that, we're going to see more kind of interpersonal connectivity done virtually.
Man, I mean, yeah, with the collapse of these nation states, now you're talking about a shift, in how people move, because without these nation states, you're going to have massive refugees, from, coming up from South America, same with like Africa, the Middle East to Europe. But not only that, I have the feeling that we're going to have American refugees from a lot of these coastal cities that, that did not amply prepare. I think Florida in particular, they're not preparing. I mean, they should have had constructions of seawalls going 10 years ago. But I guess my question would be, how do you see that polarizing effect now, politically, will aid the dehumanization of American citizens as the other or as a refugee once these crises start and once resources start to get more limited?
That's an interesting idea. And I have two younger brothers and both live in the Tampa area. So I do think about that. I mean, and I've seen predictions that say 30 years from now, much of Miami will be uninhabitable. So I think we're certainly going to see the movement of people. But again, I think technology is going to allow the people to move to safer places and still be economically viable. I mean, to be quite honest with you, I think we're going to see a reversal of the century-long movement of people from the northern United States to the southern United States, kind of reversed. As the climate gets hotter, I think we're going to see people moving out of not just Florida but other parts of the South as well, to parts of the North, and of course that's going to have a big political impact as well, because you have these kind of these deep red states, Alabama and places like that. What are going to happen if a lot of people move from Alabama or Louisiana to Minnesota or Wisconsin? We're going to have kind of a redrawing of the political lines there, energized by climate change, but enabled by technology that allows people to live where they want to live more than they could have in the past. I mean, I just think that we're to a large extent moving beyond the point in history where people moved to where the jobs were. I mean, we're beyond a point, like 100 years ago, where people were leaving the rural South to move to, the industrial cities of the North. And now we're going to see people moving from the blazingly hot South to the more temperate North.
Yeah, I guess with well, I guess, do you think the political reaction to that, is going to be one of coming together in unity, or do you think that even that itself, could be politicized?
Well, there could be resistance. There may be places where people say, we don't want these kind of, these reverse carpetbaggers to get more people, climate refugees from the South. Just as we're going to see people who will resist technological change. I mean, this is, kind of another point that I've, made over and over again, as we see more artificial intelligence, more virtual connectivity and stuff like that, human implants and all these sorts of things. I think we're going to see the rise of massive political movements that see all of this as dehumanizing. I think we're going to see kind of modern day Luddites who are, opposed to technological change. And I think that's going to be a big political factor that features well. But, the answer to your question is that I think there will be places that will be receptive to these immigrants. There are other places that not. And again, that kind of replicates what happened 100, 150 years ago. I mean, there were people and places in the North that said, "Yeah, come on, rural Southerners, come on up here and work for us." There are other places that said, "We don't want your kind here." Kind of go back to the Okies of the 1930s moving to California, as we all know from reading novels. There were a lot of Californians who said, "Yeah, we don't want you guys out here." So I think we will see some of that as well. So it'll just depend. There's some people that say, "Yeah, kind of come here, buy a house, and become one of us." There are others that say, "No, there's enough of us here. Housing's already expensive enough. You have different political beliefs, so why don't you just stay there?" So I mean, it's going to be a fault line of the future.
Now, going off what you were saying about emerging technologies, primarily implants, I think that's one of my biggest fears of the future is that, with we'll just use Elon Musk's Neuralink as an example, though I'm sure he won't get it to work. When you start implementing these types of implants, these technological implants, you're going to see, only the well-to-do be able to afford them at first, and that is going to create a we're talking about a wealth gap now, but now we're talking about an intelligence gap, and a gap to where, the people who are going to, choose to merge with these technologies are going to have a fundamentally different perspective on reality. And the folks that are, left, I guess, left out of that transition, they're, I don't want to say they're going to be second class citizens. I'd like your thoughts on that, but they're going to be incompatible with those who,
Yeah.
choose to advance with technology.
most of my thinking has been within the military context, because there are people talking about, implants that could potentially create super soldiers, strength, endurance, intelligence, and so forth. And I say, but wait a minute, we need to think really, really seriously before we go down that road, because what's going to happen to these people when they leave the military and integrate back into society? Are they going to be, permanent pariahs? Are you going to have just all former military people going off and living somewhere because with other people that have the implants and whatever? But I think you've kind of cast it more broadly, and I think it's not hard to imagine a future where we are separated into small communities of really advanced people that have access to all the technology, that live healthy lives to 150 years old, and so forth, separated from the masses of people that don't have access to that. And we know, I mean, that's historical patterns. I mean, you can go back and look at ancient empires, and I mean, the people in the nobility were a foot taller than commoners, just simply because of different diet and things like that. I mean, it would be certainly unfortunate, but not hard to imagine, kind of a dystopian future where we have, cities in the cloud of people who have integrated with the technology and have artificial intelligence and all of that kind of stuff. And then you have kind of, the seething masses who were left behind.
Yeah, I mean, well, it's kind of like that movie Elysium, where they have the richest of the rich get all these implants, and they just,
Yeah.
break or create their own little breakaway society, and the Earth at this point is just used for resources. But I mean, it seems like the only other option would be to develop AI technologies, and if we're going sci-fi dystopias, that's a lot scarier than implementing, like, I don't know, cyborgs.
Well, and my big concern is, let's not just simply focus on the technology, the feasibility of technology, but let's also think through the ethics of it as well.
Right.
I mean, technology and ethics have to be, two sides of the same coin. So I think that's something that we, not only as, as Americans in the United States, but the people of the world have to think about, is as we face these new challenges and new technological opportunities become available. I mean, are they going to be, if there's an implant that makes you live to 150 years old, does that become a basic human right that everyone around the world is eligible for? Does it become a national right that only every American is eligible for? Or does it become purely economic, where only the top 5% of the income, the people that can actually afford to buy it on the market, are eligible for? So we have to decide what's a human right and what is who can afford.
Yeah, I mean, if we're looking at historical trends, it seems like it's going to be something that would be on the market. But I don't know. I guess looking at let's say the biological aspect of it. On the opposite end of the coin, you have technologies like CRISPR, where you can design. I mean, I don't want to say you can at this point, but in the future, you would be able to design these designer children that would have certain attributes extenuated, certain sequences removed, certain talents like intelligent, cognitive capabilities heightened. And I would say if you're gonna take humanity evolutionary to the next step, that would probably be the way that you could make that a human right, as opposed to, implants. Because I don't know, you're going to always have a backlash. I mean, you have people who refuse to get vaccinated with something that the FDA approved. You're never going to convince a certain section, to get implants. But, you can sell that aspect of like biological enhancements. You can sell to someone that your child may never have cancer, right? Or won't have the ability to
Right.
get heart disease, that sort of thing. So I guess, what do you think are the pros and cons between those two options? I guess the third one as well, with AI technologies.
Well, I mean, to kind of circle back to a point I made earlier, I think there's going to be just a massive political movements who are opposed to all of this as dehumanizing. I mean, the idea that we can, design our children. I mean, there are going to be a lot of people, whether for religious grounds or ethical grounds or whatever. I think this is going to be massive, potentially even violent resistance to that. But but again, to kind of go back to it, we as a nation and people globally as well have evolved over time in terms of defining what is a universal human right and what isn't. The United States is just now reaching a point where we seem to believe that having access to healthcare is a universal right rather than something that should simply be available to people that can afford it. I think as these new technologies emerge, we're going to have to make the same kind of decisions. There's certainly going to be pressure from people that say, listen, I'm rich enough to afford all of that kind of stuff. So therefore I should have the right to it. And the other people are going to say, but wait a minute, even though I don't have the money to design my child, somehow there's a social responsibility to spread this equitably.